You're listening to the DCAU Review, hosted by Cal and Liam. Streaming on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and at DCAUreview.com. Now, here's today's episode.
Welcome to the DCAU Review. I am your host, Cal, and with me for our 83rd edition is, as he has been for each and every one of our editions thus far, including our 2 bonus episodes, it's my good brother, Liam. Liam, welcome to episode 83 of the DCAU Review.
Yes, we have entered the final month of 2019. My goodness, I can't believe the year's almost over already, but we've got 4 more reviews this month to finish out the year strong, and we are going back to the world of Justice League.
Well, it's funny. You said that on Twitter today, earlier this week, I guess, because we are, of course, broadcasting live mornings 10-9 Central, Saturday mornings. This is not pre-recorded. But earlier in the week, you tweeted that we were headed back to the world of Justice League, which got me thinking, isn't that the same world that we've been in this entire time? Isn't it all the world of DCAU? But I know what you mean.
Oh, yeah. If you want to be pedantic about it.
I was feeling a little snarky today, so I guess I went with that. But yes, we are back in the so-called world of Justice League. We are flashing forward, I guess, on the timeline, so to speak here, Liam. And the world is much larger. We have multiple superheroes again, and more than just Batman and Superman here. We're back to actually the entire Justice League on this week's episode, which is entitled Tabula Rasa, Liam.
Yeah, it's a really interesting episode, and we will get to our 4 main categories in just a moment here. But first, of course, Cal, I have to start us off with our Imdb Synopses.
Definitely.
And the synopsis for Tabula Rasa, parts 1 and 2, which were written by Stan Berkowitz and directed by Dan Reba, read as such. Lex Luthor finds an extremely advanced android that can imitate superpowers and manipulates it to attack the Justice League. And for part 2, that synopsis reads as such. Android Amazo has absorbed most of the League's powers, but begins to question Luthor's true motivations. Meanwhile, Batman reveals he has a contingency plan for Superman going AWOL. Kryptonite.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there. It was just so inspired by your baritone there. It was fantastic. So that's a good synopsis. This episode, if I didn't mention, first aired back October the 4th, 2003. So that puts us at about 16 years ago, which is not quite as far as some of those Batman episodes seem to be, but it's about 16 years ago, back in October. Liam, so this episode, it brings us the introduction of the Amazo character, who has a deep-rooted history and sort of goofiness in some ways, but also has been a major player at different points of time and different time periods in the DC Comics continuity.
Yeah, he's sort of one of the archetypal classic Justice League villains. The idea... obviously, there are varying versions, and we'll certainly get into that maybe when we talk in visuals, but it's a classic villain, the basic idea being he's a robot that has all of the powers of the Justice League, and, with all of their strengths, and at least not on the surface, not a lot of their weaknesses, it creates a really interesting problem where, this in this case, the 7 or 6, I guess, because Batman doesn't have powers, but the most powerful beings on Earth, at least that we're aware of at this point in the timeline of the DCAU, are really kind of thrown off their game because they no longer have the advantages that all of their powers and gifts usually bring them in a fight.
Definitely. You mentioned in the synopsis from IMDb that this is another Lex Luthor episode. So we have Lex Luthor as our main protagonist here, or antagonist, I'm sorry, here for this episode. And he seems to be, at the beginning of the episode, he's kind of handling his own against Hawkgirl and Superman, but we quickly learn that he is still dying. As we found out in the Injustice for All episode that he's dying, and whatever, I guess the suit is supposed to be keeping him alive, and he takes some damage to the suit, and that's kind of causes him to run into an old friend / lover / chauffeur. I'm not sure if they had ever. I mean, so we know that
they
Mercy
removed all subtext from Superman.
Yeah. I mean, in
about what Mercy's role was to Lex Luthor.
Right. In World's Finest, we saw that she would just happen to be in Lex's bedroom in full chauffeur gear with no explanation in the middle of the night. But this one sort of spells it out in plain English that Lex and his chauffeur were apparently quite the item. And he seems to have decided to leave LexCorp and all of his assets, pun intended, in charge with Mercy Graves, and he comes to collect and get her help to find Dr. Ivo, who he believes is going to be the person that can help him. Unclear if that means it's going to be a doctor that's going to cure him or somebody that's going to help him build or fix his suit. I felt that was sort of the line, maybe both, because Batman mentions later on that he was an MD.
Right.
So hard to tell, but in the meantime, we find out that Ivo is dead, and in his stead, there is this 10-foot tall android known later. We find out who's named Amazo, and this guy's pretty special. And as the name would suggest, he has a childlike mind or sort of a blank slate for a brain, and Lex does his dirty work to do manipulation and use this powerful android to try and defeat his most hated foes.
Yeah, that to me is one of the more interesting parts of the episode. Is, as you know, much of the action just comes from the big fights between the League and Amazo, but the actual really interesting part of the story is that one, it does really focus on Lex and Amazo and even Mercy almost as much, if not more, than the actual Justice League in this episode. And it's really focused on Amazo's sort of need for this father figure that he had in Professor Ivo, who is now dead and doesn't really grasp the concept of death. And Lex being the master manipulator, it's a cakewalk for him to sort of bend this android to his will and to lie to him and to make him do his bidding. So that's really sort of the meat and potatoes of this episode is really just Lex repeatedly manipulating Amazo, and to a lesser extent Mercy, I guess, into doing what he wants, and really only getting his comeuppance at the very end. There's also this subplot of Martian Manhunter in an attempt to track down Lex Luthor, basically opens his mind to the thoughts of every citizen in the city, and sort of drives him mad and forces him into exile for most of both episodes until he sort of comes back near the end. What
did you think of that? Okay, yeah. What did you think of this subplot? Because, so there's a little bit in this episode, and I'd be curious to pick the brain. It's at times like this that I wish that Bruce Timm had a Twitter or something that we could, or even reach out to Stan Berkowitz or the people that wrote this episode and find out. But so how much? It seems like they lifted a lot of stuff from Dr. Manhattan from Watchmen for this episode. You get a big vibe from Amazo in that probably last 5 to 7 minutes of his sort of transformation and evolution is very, very similar to me to a Dr. Manhattan type thing. But even the idea, the Dr. Manhattan meme, I'm sick of this world or whatever it is.
Yes.
I got a very strong vibe of that, even in that first part with Martian Manhunter, where he exiles himself out into the wilderness, where he can't believe that human thoughts are so self-centered and rude and two-faced and I don't know, mean-spirited and racist and all of the things that he hears when he does the scan. it's an interesting plot, but first of all, Superman is a jerk for asking him to do that, knowing what the risk was. He even asked him. He's like, Martian Manhunter's like, I could open the floodgates and it couldn't close, and Superman's like, yeah, I know, but we got to find Luthor. It's the most important thing in the world. It's like, what? Yeah, screw you, John.
Well, I don't know. So here's the thing. On the surface level, I like this plot. I think it could almost be its own episode, like where we just follow Jean around for the whole episode, and he kind of goes on a journey to understand humanity better. And we may or may not get into an episode that tackles that exact topic later this month, but it's that being a subplot within this episode, it definitely it's full because, like I said, in a bottle, I really liked this because Jean has sort of lost faith and doesn't understand why he's doing what he's doing anymore. And in this moment of his crisis of conscience, he stumbles across a search party who are looking for this lost little girl. And this time, when he opens his mind, he hears nothing but selflessness and compassion and caring for others, and that kind of restores his faith, and he's able to find the girl and reunite her with her family, and he and Wonder Woman kind of share a nice moment. But yeah, that being shoved into this already kind of full plot of Lex Luthor's manipulation of this childlike android and all of that, it's interesting. But obviously, I guess that's sort of the ending of the episode. To get back to it, is Jean eventually does confront Amazo as the rest of the league has kind of fallen at his side, and willingly gives Amazo his powers and allows Amazo to read their minds and to read the mind of Lex Luthor, which is Lex's ultimate undoing. And then, as you mentioned, Amazo sort of just feels that he has nothing left to gain from staying on Earth and just floats off into the stars, and that's basically the end of the episode. So yeah, I don't think it's perfect. I guess we can get into our plot scores here. I went 7 out of 10. I think it's good. I think there's a lot of interesting things at play here, but like I said, I think it's a little that the Jean subplot, as much as I like it in a bottle, does feel like it could have belonged in a different episode, and here it's maybe pulls focus from what is already kind of a full plate. But sure. Yeah, I went ahead and gave plot 7 out of 10 here.
I guess, you know what? I thought we were going to disagree on this more than we did. And I guess in words we did, but our scores are exactly the same because I gave it a 7 out of 10 as well. Yeah, I think that it could have served, even if they just did a surface level glance over of this. And I think that it's ultimately was just a plot device to get John out of there so that this power couldn't be stolen earlier, because if Amazo has this power beforehand and can read Luthor's mind and is able to determine his plot beforehand, there's no story. Right. So having that as the reason why Jean couldn't be there, okay, I guess. And I guess it does a little more fleshing out. Obviously, we haven't done the Justice League episodes in order, but there wasn't a whole ton of... I mean, the whole first episode of Secret Origins is about Jean's origin, like his where he came from and such. But yeah, we didn't really flesh out the character itself. And there's a little bit of... I don't know, a New Frontier, like an ode to the New Frontier graphic novel, which is a classic. If you haven't read it before, definitely go out and get yourself a copy. But there's some good Martian Manhunter in that book, him adapting and learning human life as a Martian. So yeah, I can see why, and fleshing out that character a little bit. I think the thing that I liked the most about this episode and the plot was just the fact that you got to see the entire Justice League working together for the most part, for the first time, I think, really since we reviewed Secret Origins, or I guess Injustice for All had some full team battles too. But it's cool to see. It's always cool to see the team working together as a whole, and then it not ending necessarily with fists, but with just sort of Jean using his power to kind of share that piece with Amazo, and then Amazo just kind of flying off. Obviously, what do you think, Liam? What are the chances that he returns later in the series?
Who could possibly say? But I would say it is a strong possibility that he could in fact return one day, perhaps in an episode called The Return, in fact, later on down the line in perhaps a sequel series. But a couple other plot notes. One thing, just as a whole, and this goes not just for comic books, but for all science fiction, nanotechnology is such a deus ex machina device, where it's like, why can he copy all of the League's powers? Nanotechnology. So not only can he copy like physical DNA, like Superman's or Hawkgirl's or Martian Manhunters, but he can also copy like the technology needed to make a Green Lantern ring,
or the Hawkgirl's mace, or Hawkgirl's wings, or
right.
Yeah,
So it's one of the things. Well, he can do all of that and more, apparently, as we find out. So that always kind of that's always just something. Whenever I hear the words nanotechnology, my eyes glaze over a little bit. And again, that's not just in comic books. That's kind of anywhere in science fiction or
that means we don't have to explain. It's the
correct
catch-all be-all.
And my other one note I wanted to mention is that I did really like the scene where Batman and Superman are just hanging out in the Batmobile drinking coffee. I thought that was fun.
That was a good fun scene. It was nice to explore their friendship in a little way there. That was I enjoyed that as well. Good point. Well, I think with mentioning sort of the nanotechnology and the copying and stuff, that would be a good segue to our next category, Liam, which would be visuals and animation. This episode, of course, we're back to the new digital animation. We're not doing the hand-drawn stuff that we've been covering from Batman the Animated Series, or even before that when we did Superman the Animated Series for the last couple months. So we're back to the digital palette here. So we're sort of a different sandbox, if you will. So we have a different criteria. With that said, there was still, I think, there was a few issues with Superman being off model a little bit. He kind of had a bigger, like, it was almost like his head was in an angle at times. His chin was jutted out a little bit more and his head was a little further back. Nitpicking, but that's what we do here. I really liked when Amazo sees Lex for the very first time, and we the visualization of his powers, his face sort of morphs into Lex's, and then morphs back into his own. And I really wish we had gotten to see that. And they do it a little bit, with Hawkgirl. He grows the wings, and the mace sort of forms out of his hand. With Wonder Woman, I guess he gets the gauntlets on his wrists, because I don't remember that necessarily standing out, but later on he's got the gauntlet bracelets on his arms. Then you have, of course, the Green Lantern ring. You have, when he sees Superman, he gets the S shield, just the outline of the S shield on his chest. Other than that, I thought they did a really good job of helping him show emotion for somebody that doesn't have a mouth or a nose. A lot of eyes, a lot of eyebrow, furrowed brow movements. Certainly some worried looks there. This is our first look at a newly designed Mercy Graves. She has long hair now because she's a CEO,
and so she has to suit instead of a leather chauffeur dress.
Right, exactly. Other than that, you get your classics: Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, Green Lantern, Hawkgirl, Flash. Jean, we get two versions of Jean, his superhero and his natural form. But a lot of it takes place, or almost exclusively takes place at night. What visual stood out for you for this episode?
Yeah, a lot of what we just covered. The shot, I guess, at the end of part one, where it's sort of established that he now has all of their powers, where he grows their wings out, he has the ring, he has the visual bracelets, and then he has the outline of the shield on his chest. I thought that was a really cool look of a bit like superhero Terminator or something. I guess we can talk about this visual of Amazo compared to the comic book version, or perhaps the version if folks listening have seen the Batman Under the Red Hood movie, which we covered back in episode 50, which you can find at DCAUreview.com. That sort of classic look where he's in like the green jumpsuit with the like the Spock ears and the red hair. I think I mostly prefer this version. Like, there's something very classic and retro about that regular Amazo look, but I think for this world and for the version of Amazo they were going for, because they were playing it kind of pretty, serious and straight up, and that he's sort of still learning who he is. He doesn't really have a strong human or any sort of humanoid form to take, other than that, like, he has arms and legs, obviously. So, like you said, I appreciated that they did do a good job having him show emotion and genuine concern for Lex, and whether it's anger or sadness or confusion, they did a good job. I also like there's a lot of POV shots where it shows Amazo looking at the heroes as he's gaining their powers, and it'll kind of go to a POV, and little like data points will start appearing next to the heroes as he's absorbing their powers. I thought that was clever, and I really love the scene where Batman brings out the kryptonite for the first time. I think that's a really, really cool visual idea, and just the way it looked, Batman sort of in his glory, facing down against this near literal god, and just pulling out the green rock as danger flashes on Amazo's screen, and he's forced to flee. And then later, when Amazo grabs the chunk of kryptonite and just hurls it at Superman full force,
that was great.
It explodes all over Superman's chest, and then the follow-up of that, of the Flash using his power to kind of get rid of the residue that was left on Superman, I thought was all really clever. So, yeah, there's a lot of really clever stuff whenever you get to see like Heat Vision versus Heat Vision, or a Green Lantern fighting another Green Lantern ring. That's always going to make for some very cool visuals. So, yeah, all in all, a pretty strong visual episode all around, I thought.
Yeah, I liked so that there's a scene where they go back to Ivo's mansion, I guess, sort of thing, after Lex is sort of escaped, and they're doing some investigation. Lex is booby-trapped it and sets off a bomb. So Superman, in order to preserve the scene, to try and do what he can to save all the evidence so they continue to do investigation, he uses his super breath. What do we call that? Super breath?
Yeah, I think it's just super breath.
Right? Super breath. He says, watch out for the wind, and Flash apparently was unaware of his power to be able to blow a lot.
He didn't really ever use that in Superman the Animated Series, did he?
So he didn't use freeze breath. I feel like he did once or twice in an episode, but typically he did the rapid tornado, right, sort of Tasmanian devil type spin to put out fires and stuff, as we saw in several episodes of Superman the Animated Series we've covered already. But yeah, I don't know. I thought that was a cool visual. But yeah, overall, most people looked good. I gave animation very strong, 8 out of 10.
Yeah, I'm right in that same ballpark. I went 9 out of 10. Just some minor inconsistencies. You mentioned Superman. This is a pretty petty gripe, but I did notice it. The bat on Batman's chest was, I thought, kind of odd. It looks more, it's sort of stretched out and angled, almost more like the Batman Beyond bat, and as opposed to the smaller sort of straight up bat that we see, kind of very similar to the new Batman Adventures bat. So that's just some minor things. There's a few other things I thought with Green Lantern's head also kind of looking too small in a few spots. And again, these are all nitpicky things, but I think, yeah, as if you look at it, just the visuals are a tiny bit off, and that brought it down just a bit. But still, overall, as we've said, as we spent the last few minutes praising it for the most part, it's a really fun episode, and those fight scenes are just great eye candy.
I agree. All right, William, let's move on to animation. Or sorry, not animation. Let's move on to music. We had music was done by Lolita Ridmanis for this episode, and we have some old cues in there. We have some nods to Batman the Animated Series. His theme comes through in a couple of parts of the episode. It's some good fight music also. I think that the scenes are scored pretty well. with that said, I'm still lacking, and so hard. We've talked about this before on a few other episodes. It's so hard to sort of compare this series with Batman the Animated Series, but that's what we're doing. That's what this whole show is about. We're comparing across the entire DCAU, and so looking at the series and just wishing, like, man, I wish sometimes that these episodes you would have a reoccurring standout theme for a villain, a memorable sort of standout theme. Like we've talked about, so many of those Batman animated series episodes are great because they have a theme for the villain, or they have something that cues the atmosphere when a villain enters the scene.
And there is a little bit of that with Amazo generally, especially when he's gaining the powers. Mm-hmm. Sort of, it's almost similar to, I think, the Brainiac theme or something, where it's more like just a quick refrain or a sound effects mixed with some sort of ominous horns or strings that come in. So there is a little touch of that, but to your point, it's not quite the iconic sort of full theme that you might hear for a Joker or a Two-Face or even Metallo or somebody from Superman.
Sure, absolutely. That's nitpicking. Again, I think it was strong for the most part. I think that actually I really, really enjoyed. There's actually several scenes that aren't punctuated by a lot of music, and one of them is when Amazo starts questioning Lex for the first time, and you see Lex's face kind of screw up the first time that he asks him why. And, it relates sort of back to that. And maybe this is plot, but I'm going to talk about it anyway, but it relates back to the title of the episode. And you think about it when a child is growing up and the first time that they're defiant of their parent, or they don't just do what their parent tells them to do. And it's, very easily could have been an overpowering theme that came through at that point, or something to make that statement stand out. But I think it stood out even more by there just kind of being little to no music at that point. So I really, really, really liked that. But I think that, again, I'm missing those strong standout themes, memorable themes. I think that's just something that will continue to be missed in most of these Justice League episodes, because I just don't think it was a part of the production, and there's nothing offensive about the music. I liked it for the most part. And like you said, some of those scenes are punctuated as he gains these powers and begins sort of creating this evolution type transformation. So I gave music 7 out of 10.
Yeah, I'm in the same ballpark. I gave it 8 out of 10. I also liked most of the music that accompanied the Martian Manhunter subplot, especially once he gets to the woods and he's sort of, monologuing to himself about all of the hatred and despair he felt. And then that sort of juxtaposed with when he does sort of regain his faith in humanity, that the music gets very sweet and kind of almost Disney-ish. And as he goes and finds the little girl and then brings her back to her family, I really like the scene there. And then as he and Wonder Woman hug there, I think there's some really nice, sweet music in there. So yeah, I think I gave it an 8 out of 10 if I didn't already say. But yeah, I think this is a really strong episode for the most part. But as you mentioned, maybe missing that really iconic villain theme that would have maybe pushed it up a few more points.
Totally agree. All right, William, let's head to our final category of the day, which is going to be our voice acting. And of course, we have a few returning familiar voices that we will certainly know as soon as we start talking about them and as soon as you hear them. Of course, we also have a brand new star, as we have Amazo introduced for the first time. So why don't you tell us about our cast of characters for today's episode?
Yeah, we have, as you mentioned, mostly our regular cast, but a few exceptions. We have Lisa Edelstein returning as Mercy. She's the same voice actress that was from Superman the Animated Series. And that was one of the things when I watched this time, Cal, was definitely I did not remember how big of a role Mercy had in this episode. And weird subtext of her and Lex's relationship notwithstanding, I thought she did a very good job. We have Robert Picardo as Amazo, who folks might know from Star Trek, or actually a previous appearance in this series in an episode we reviewed in the Savage time. He played the lead Blackhawk as well, so a veteran voice actor, and even has played other roles within the DC animation community. So I think Robert does a pretty strong job as Amazo, again trying to capture it's sort of a generic robot voice, but also has to be able to emote because so much of the episode is predicated on his concern and his wanting to make things better and to do a good job for Lex, then mixed with sort of the anger and doubt, and then finally the sort of righteous fury when he realizes he's been sort of betrayed and that Lex has been using him all along. He's got a lot to do, but I think he does a really good job.
Yeah, I agree. I think I was a little hesitant at first. I thought, ooh, man, because we have the classic sort of android robot voice, who's the GOAT, of course, Corey Burton, who just has such giant shoes to fill in being that soulless, heartless villain. Of course, we haven't reviewed the episode yet, but there's a tremendous performance in the Hardak episode, from my recollection, of Batman the Animated Series. That robotic voice, and actually, we even have Kevin Conroy has his own go as a robotic android in the follow-up episode, his Silicon Soul. But so you have these performances that are already iconic, and you're just like, man, I don't know if this guy's going to be able to work. But he does a good job, and especially as the evolution of Amazo goes on throughout the episode, he begins to show more emotion. Even in that final scene, once he's just kind of wipes his hands of the whole situation and decides he's done. I think it was really, really good. I think he put on a great performance.
Definitely. And then of course we have our main villain of the piece, that is of course the returning Clancy Brown as Lex Luthor, who is, he's as reliable as it gets. Obviously by the time this episode was produced and made, he had been playing Lex Luthor for the better part of a decade, and he can slip into that role with great ease. And I think he does a really good job here, because again, Lex is kind of the main focus of the episode. We spend more time with Lex than really any other character in the show in these two episodes, and his performance, as he's such a sort of devilish, manipulative creep. And you really kind of, at the end there, when Amazo starts just tearing him apart and ripping his big robot suit apart, and he's begging for mercy from this monster that he sort of had a hand in creating.
Not Mercy Graves.
No, not Mercy Graves. The other monster, Amazo. I thought he did a really great job. And then, of course, we have our main cast. We have Maria Canales as Hawkgirl. We have Michael Rosenbaum as The Flash. We have Phil Lamar as Green Lantern. Carl Lumbly as Martian Manhunter. Kevin Conroy as Batman. George Newbern as Superman. And Susan Eisenberg as Wonder Woman. Everybody kind of gets a little bit of a moment to shine. I think it's tough, and this is maybe more of a narrative issue than anything in voice acting. But when you have all 7 members in an episode, there's only going to be so much dialogue to go around. So it's tough for a lot of the characters to really have a strong moment as far as voice acting goes. Mm-hmm. Obviously, like we said, the subplot, Carl Lumbly has a lot to do in his subplot, and Superman and Batman, George Newbern and Kevin Conroy get to be kind of the detective duo who interrogate Mercy and then sort of are going over strategy in the Batmobile, as we mentioned. But everybody else is just kind of they're kind of just there to react to what's happening. So I didn't think anyone was bad as far as our main cast goes, but nothing really super stand out from most of the cast other than maybe Carl Lumbly.
I thought, I kind of see what you're going for there, and I see what you mean. There's a lot of, it's a potpourri, if you will, of performances, not a whole lot of single strong performances. I think Carl Lumbly, you're right, is good, and I think that really the main person that we hear from a lot is going to be Clancy Brown. He's the person, like you said, that carries the entire episode. It's a lot of him. It's a lot of him interacting with Mercy. It's a lot of him interacting with Amazo. It's a lot of him interacting at the end with Justice League. So yeah, I think that it's really Clancy's show here, and that dude doesn't disappoint. Based on that, and I think that really everybody else did a good job. Like I think that it was, people did what they were asked to do, and it was strong. It was actually good enough for me to give it a perfect 10 out of 10. What about you?
Yeah, I'm in that same ballpark. I went 8 out of 10. Like I said, I didn't feel like anyone other than Carl's performances in the main cast was particularly inspired. Again, they can all do these performances in their sleep. They're very rarely any worse than good. But yeah, just for me, I felt like maybe, and that again, maybe that's not really that's not the fault of the voice actors, but I thought the way the plot was laid out, and because Clancy Brown, who again does such a great job, but the Leaguers themselves, I was maybe a little underwhelmed by, so I went 8 out of 10.
I hear you. All right, Liam. Well, that will bring us to our...
Actually...
Oh, that sounds like a bonus point.
It does, and I just thought of it on the fly here as we're recording live. And that is for the...
You mean we're streaming live? We're not recording. This episode isn't recorded.
Well,
the person listening to this,
future plays after. It's
the person listening to this is always listening to this as it's live.
All right. All right. I'm not going to question that.
Just like the future is always 30 years from now, according
correct.
to
Anyway, but my bonus point is for the scene where Amazo goes looking for Lex Luthor as after the mansion is blown up, and he's sort of tracking him down, and he comes across a bald man who's on a payphone. And wouldn't you know it, when he turns around, he happens to look a lot like Smallville actor Michael Rosenbaum.
And he's voiced.
Yes, and he was also happened to be voiced by Michael Rosenbaum, because of course, when this show was produced, Smallville was in full swing. So that lovely full head of hair that you see Michael Rosenbaum with, if you look up a picture of him these days, he was a bald man in that era due to having to shave his head. I think he said pretty much every single day while he was working on Smallville.
Sounds about right.
And so I loved the real life cameo of Michael Rosenbaum showing up, and of course the joke being, haha, he's Lex Luthor on another show, and he's mistaken for Lex Luthor on this show as well, and a little bit of a retroactive Easter egg to the great episode of Justice League Unlimited where Lex and the Flash switch brains.
There you go. Which I can't wait to cover that one. That's going to be a classic as well.
Absolutely.
All right, so now that will bring us to our final scores of the day. Liam totaling up everything. Today, I end up with a final score of 32 out of 40.
And I'm right in that same wheelhouse, but a little bit stronger at 33 out of 40.
All right, so I guess that leaves us to talk about rewatchability. We always recommend watching this episode. I think just because it ties in later on to another episode of Justice League Unlimited. Again, we haven't reviewed it yet, so I can't say whether or not we'd see or skip that one. But from my recollection, that is a fun, enjoyable episode, and I would give it the old rewatch.
Yeah, I think it ties into not only a future episode featuring Amazo, but also to kind of one of the main plots of the Cadmus arc in Justice League Unlimited,
sure,
involving what Lex Luthor's ultimate plot is before the actual resolution comes along. So, yeah, there's a lot of callbacks to this episode and to Dr. Ivo and to nanotechnology and all this other fun stuff later on at Justice League Unlimited. So yeah, I would definitely give this one a thumbs up for a rewatch. And because again, even if it isn't quite perfect, it is even without all of the continuity that it establishes, it's also generally a pretty fun and easy to watch 2 episodes.
Totally agree. All right, Liam. Well, that will bring us to the end of this week's episode. Thank you so much for listening. As we always ask you to do, please, if you have time, give us a review, give us a subscribe. Yeah, subscribe to us on your favorite podcast app, whether that's Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or, of course, Spotify. Liam, of course, we are in the month of December here, which we've talked about. We're going to be spending our time with Justice League. Do you want to tell the good folks at home which episode we'll be discussing next week?
Yes, we'll be staying in Justice League Season 2, and we will be reviewing one of the first Wonder Woman-centric episodes we've watched so far, and that will be the episode Maid of Honor.
There you go. All right, so Maid of Honor coming up next week, streaming here and always at DCAUreview.com. Of course, you can also find us, interact with us, and certainly tell us if you liked this episode, your thoughts on this week's episode via social media. Liam, we have 2 different forms of social media people can check out. Why don't you tell the good people? Two. Only 2. That's right. Those are the only ones that we bother with because Facebook sucks. So even though the other one of the ones that we do is owned by Facebook, so it really they just suck you in. That's fine. But why don't you tell the good folks at home where they can follow us and interact with us?
Yes, you can head to Instagram and follow us at DCAU Review, where we post screenshots from episodes we'll be reviewing, as well as generally audio previews, usually on Wednesday before the show goes up. So you can get a little taste of what we'll be talking about before the episode goes live. I don't know how we do that since this is live, but we've broken the space-time continuum enough to have a minute's worth of our review posted 3 days before it actually goes live. You can head to Instagram and see those sneak previews.
Spoiled again, darn it.
Yes. It's another paradox. I blame Barry Allen.
Yep,
and then you can also head to twitter.com and follow us again at DCAU Review. You can let us know what you thought of this episode, anything else we've reviewed, what you'd like to see us review next. And I actually have a poll going, which I think will run through the first couple days of this coming week, where as you may have noticed if you've been listening to us for a little bit, and we thank you for that, we've done a couple bonus episodes this year. We did a top 5 list. We did a top 10 list, actually, both focused on sort of other elements of the DCAU rather than a traditional episode or DC animation review. And so I just kind of wanted to get a gauge if we were going to do more bonus episodes in the new year, and I think we will, what people would like to see. And I gave a couple options that you could vote for, as well as an option to just tweet us and let us know if one of the if what you think we should do is not on my list that I put up in the poll. So definitely head to Twitter, interact with us, let us know what you think we should do when it comes to the new year. And other than that, we'll see you next week, I guess.
Absolutely. So I'm Cal.
And I'm Liam.
And we will talk to you on the next edition of the DCAU Review.
Adios.